The Sacramento Kings are 15-22.
Check it out.
What's up, Kings fans? It's official. We are in the second half of the NBA season. That's right. This is episode 12 of the Royal Report with Calvin and Barry, a Sacramento Kings sports talk show. Quick shout out to all my Sacramento Kings fans out there. And if you are a Kings fan, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. Make sure you turn on your notifications. We put out a brand new episode every Friday, so make sure you stay tuned.
That's right. Welcome in all you loyal Royals out there for episode 12. Thank you for watching on this week's show. It's all about the upcoming March 25th trade deadline and what the Sacramento Kings will look like once that deadline hits. But as always, we start with some highlights from around the league. This past week was all about All-Star Weekend down in Atlanta. Steph Curry took home the three-point shootout championship with a record-setting performance of 31 points. Of course, Steph did have the added Mountain Dew ball that a lot of previous champions didn't have the fortune of having that opportunity. But nonetheless, he still put up in a ridiculous shooting performance, like many expected. As far as the game goes itself, Giannis took home MVP honors with a perfect 16 for 16 shooting performance from the field. I don't think anybody saw that one coming. The game itself was mostly about the little guys though. Half-court shots from Steph and Dame Lillard, and a few pairs of alley-oops to both Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, and even Chris Paul got into the catching of the alley-oop dunk act during the game. So it was nice to see the little guys balling out there.
Yeah, very exciting to watch. You know, obviously not as much fun as a normal All-Star weekend, but it's good to have a little break from the Kings season, give them a little bit of rest and see some festivities go down. So exciting there. Another highlight this week, there are 14 finalists into the Basketball Hall of Fame, headlined by Chris Webber, 5-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, and very close to our hearts here in Sacramento. And also Coach Rick Adelman, one of my favorite coaches of all time, and actually ninth all time in wins. So pretty exciting news there. Also wanted to wish a happy birthday to Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes is from Sacramento. He played on the Kings twice. He played on the Clippers twice. He played on the Warriors twice. He is a true NBA journeyman. So happy birthday, Matt. We're happy to have you in Sacramento.
That's right, Matt Barnes from Del Campo High School in Fair Oaks, California. We wish a very happy birthday to Matt. In other news, March 11th, yesterday, marks the 1-year anniversary that the day the world of sports stopped. It came to a screeching halt when the NBA became the first North American major sports league to suspend play after Rudy Gobert tested positive for the coronavirus prior to the Utah Jazz's game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Of course, that positive test came just days after Rudy Gobert seemed to mock the coronavirus by touching everything in the interview room when asked about it. That did not work out so well for him. But the Jazz have rebounded nicely. They have the league's best record currently this season. If you blinked, you may have missed the end of the G League season. Their bubble performance down in Orlando, Florida, came to an end recently when the Lakeland Magic won the G League championship. Congratulations to them.
Yes, congratulations to them. Jamias Ramsey is on his way back to Sacramento. You know, we're not really certain what he will bring to the Kings and how much playing time he will get, but as we get closer to the trade deadline and players are being shuffled around, it's good to have an extra body down there. So happy to see that. We're going to take a quick break, guys, and when we get back, we'll jump right into your Sacramento Kings Weekcap. Welcome back. Well, a short week it was for the Sacramento Kings. Only one game this week against the Houston Rockets, and it was a W. So pretty excited. The Sacramento Kings are undefeated this week. Of course, there was the All-Star festivities over the weekend. We mentioned that in the previous segment. No Kings this year in the All-Star game, which is a little disappointing, but it happens. In our next segment, we're going to dive into some past performances by Sacramento Kings players that have made the All-Star team. But back to that Houston Rockets game. Awesome team performance by the Sacramento Kings. 30 points for De'Aaron Fox, 20 for Buddy Hield, 20 points for Richaun Holmes, and 20 points for Harrison Barnes. Marvin Bagley surprisingly only played 23 minutes again. I don't know what's going on with that whole situation, but Corey Joseph is playing big minutes again, 34 minutes for Corey Joseph, so he's getting starter minutes. Bagley is I guess left on the sidelines. Calvin, what did you think watching the game?
Well, I thought this was exactly the game that the Sacramento Kings needed coming out of the All-Star break. Everybody who is a Kings fan, it's been a rough couple of weeks, but it could be worse, as we saw tonight, or last night with the Houston Rockets. That team just riddled with injuries. No John Wall. DeMarcus Cousins is now being bought out potentially. No Eric Gordon went down in the third quarter of that game.
No Christian
and
Wood.
no Christian Wood as well. So this team just continues to struggle. They put up a ton of threes. They did not shoot very well from three, and the Kings were able to take advantage. De'Aaron Fox, without John Wall on the court, was able to do absolutely whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. He had a fantastic game, and as you mentioned, 4 of the 5 Kings starters scored at least 20 points. This game was exactly what they needed to get back into a rhythm, coming right out of the break, and now they're headed onto the road, so hopefully they can continue that streak.
Yeah, it's interesting. You look back a couple months ago, the Kings they had a couple games scheduled against the Grizzlies that got postponed, and it gave the Kings some extra time to rest and work on some stuff in practice. And then they rattled off, I think, like a 6 or a 7 game win streak after that. So exciting stuff there. I know it's only one game, but maybe the Kings are finding some rhythm. We'll see what happens as we get closer to the deadline. We'll be right back, guys.
Watching the All-Star game this weekend made us think about past Sacramento Kings All-Star players and performances, since we didn't have any to look upon for this year's game. Highlighting this list, of course, are Mitch Richmond, who was All-Star Game MVP in 1995 and selected to the All-Star team 6 times, as well as Chris Webber, who was selected 4 straight times in Sacramento from 1999 to 2003. Barry, while we were looking at this list, I couldn't help but be so astonished to see that Brad Miller made the All-Star team as a member of the Sacramento Kings. I had completely forgotten about that. In 2003, 2004, he averaged 14 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists a game, and was selected to that Western Conference All-Star Reserve squad.
Yeah, Big Brad. Brad Miller was kind of that prototypical center from the future, back in the day, shooting threes. Him and Rasheed Wallace, just big guys banging down low that could step out and hit the three. I know he moved on to Chicago, had a few productive years there. So exciting to see him on that list. Another one-time person on that list, former general manager Vlade Divac. I know Vlade had some time with the Lakers as well, but it was really cool to see him make an All-Star team. Also got to give a shout out to my guy Peja Stojakovic. I know Peja's made it a couple times. And then we all can't forget our last All-Star, most recent All-Star, DeMarcus Cousins. Made 3 All-Star teams, had a super bright future ahead of him when we sent him to New Orleans. Unfortunately, has had injury problems ever since. Was recently released by the Houston Rockets and is currently looking for a new home. So take a look at some highlights here of some past All-Stars, and we'll see you guys after the break.
Rushed an awful lot of jump shots. That's something they really couldn't afford him to do. So Divac somehow got that one up on the glass and got it to fall.
Oh, Webber got O'Neal to lead us. Oh! Chris Webber with authority. If you didn't like that, you don't like NBA basketball.
Congratulations, this year's MVP, Mitch Richmond.
All good stuff there. Let us know down in the comments below who your favorite Sacramento Kings All-Star was, or is, or will be. Let's move on to some trade proposals here. As we mentioned, the March 25th deadline is rapidly approaching. It's just a little under 2 weeks away now. We're going to start with somebody who has been mentioned maybe the most out of any Kings player in trade rumors, and that's Harrison Barnes. Despite being mentioned in all these trade rumors, Barnes has had a pretty good past couple of weeks. Not only was he named the NBA Players Association Secretary Treasurer, but he was also named as a finalist to the USA Men's Olympic roster as well.
Yeah, congratulations, HB. Career season. I'm happy that people are finally taking notice of you. I know it's tough playing in Sacramento sometimes, not getting the recognition that you deserve, but great job, HB. Let's move into the trades here. Unfortunately, Harrison Barnes has been mentioned as almost a sure thing to be traded before the deadline. I've seen reports from across the league saying they would be surprised if he was still on the Kings by the end of the season. I know Boston is a front runner for sure. They have expressed a lot of interest in him. And most importantly, they have the assets to acquire him, and they have the financial flexibility as well due to the trade exemption they got from the Gordon Hayward deal in last offseason. I think they would have to throw about $9 million back at the Sacramento Kings to make things work out. I love Marcus Smart, but I've seen a lot of people talking about all those young players they have. Romeo Langford, who was originally a draft pick of the Sacramento Kings, but that pick was dealt before he was drafted. Neesmith, that we had talked about in our preseason show. They have some draft picks there. And, there's just a ton of options. I really like Marcus Smart. I don't think they're really going to give up on him at this point. I think they're looking to build towards this playoff push. They see all these other teams in the Eastern Conference getting stronger, and their time is ticking. They've been a competitive team. They've been a good team, but they need to make it over that hump. And the only way they're going to do that is by trading for more veterans, getting rid of some of these young guys, and hopefully the Kings can cash in and we can find a deal that makes sense for both teams.
Yeah, that would be ideal, obviously. I'm a little skeptical, at least everything that I've heard or read in the news about a trade to the Celtics involving Harrison Barnes. I don't think the Kings are getting enough back in return. They do have a lot of those young players. Romeo Langford, while he's a pretty good offensive young talent, I don't think him and draft picks are enough for Harrison Barnes. If they are going to send a package that involves Carson Edwards, Romeo Langford, some young talent like that, the draft picks are going to have to be pretty strong for me in order to agree to do this deal. And let's be real about it. Harrison Barnes, the reason he's being mentioned so much in trade talks for Sacramento is because he's probably their number one asset to move. He is the highest value outside of De'Aaron Fox or Tyrese Halliburton, maybe, who we don't expect to be traded. Harrison Barnes is the one guy on the Kings that is going to be most wanted out there by other teams. So if I'm Sacramento, my asking price for him is going to be high. It's going to be maybe higher than what other teams would be willing to give up necessarily. I just don't see there being an option out there for Boston that involves just a couple of those young guys and maybe one first-round pick for Harrison Barnes that I'm willing to do.
Yeah, Calvin, do you think can you think of any sleeper team that might make a deal for Harrison?
Man, that's a tough call. NBA trade rumors are so hard to stay on top of. But I'd look at a team like maybe the Miami Heat. I know they've been rumored in wanting to get a guy like Bjelica or even a Buddy Hield, something along those lines. I think Miami is desperate to make a move that's going to improve their roster, period, after a pretty rough first half start of the season. So I think I would put them in as a wild card for any type of major trade deal, whether it's for Harrison Barnes or some other some other player out there. Moving right along, it's become known now that the Kings have openly made Marvin Bagley III available for a trade and are currently shopping him around the league to other teams. The rumor out there is that teams wishing to acquire Bagley are worried about, after acquiring him, having to pay him in the following offseason and how much money that's going to end up costing them. Barry, this is relatively new news. We haven't really heard anything about Marvin Bagley being moved up until very recently. Do you think this is something that's realistic?
I think it is realistic. I don't know if I personally would do it or recommend it, but I do think it's realistic. I think this Sacramento Kings front office has been a pretty tight ship since they brought all these new guys in. We haven't really heard much coming from them. So to hear that Marvin Bagley has been made available by them is, in my mind, a very big announcement. I think that we all know that Marvin hasn't been as productive as we wished, and a lot of that is outside of Marvin's doing. But it comes down to the value that he should bring the Kings, being that number 2 pick. And I think it's no surprise that his name has been mentioned in trade rumors in the past. If I'm the Kings, I'm always going to answer the phone if somebody calls me about a player. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily shopping them around, but to hear that they are now is a big announcement. And if I'm the Kings, I'm not giving up Marvin Bagley unless I get something that makes it worth my while. I don't see the need to move him at this point. He still has one more year on his rookie deal, and then he's a restricted free agent. And then, you can make a decision then. You could sign and trade him to another team. You could decline. You could match his deal and decide to keep him. But at this point, I don't really think you're going to get much. The only way I'm trading him is if I'm doing it in a Harrison Barnes or a Buddy Hield trade to bring some more value back to Sacramento.
Yeah, I think it's key what you said about how the Kings value Marvin Bagley. I mean, a team can make a player available for a trade, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're actively looking to trade him or expecting to trade him, I should say. They could be making this move to see what other teams are willing to give up for Marvin Bagley. And if it's something that the Kings feel like they really can't pass up, then maybe it's a different situation where they go ahead and make that deal. But I think it's, like we said, very key. This is a move to see what kind of value Marvin Bagley possesses to other teams in the league, and if it matches with the value that the Sacramento Kings place on him as well. I don't necessarily expect him to be dealt. I think there's still some time to work things out with him, and I'm really not so sure what his minutes are going to look like moving forward for the rest of the season. I think he deserves maybe a little bit more playing time before you jump on the let's send him out of town ship. Mm-hmm. But that all remains to be seen moving forward.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm not sure if Marvin Bagley and Richaun Holmes fit very well together. I see maybe Marvin playing more minutes at the center, and as well as Richaun's playing, there's a conflict there. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but Marvin is made available by the Sacramento Kings. It's news. We'll be right back, guys. All right, so now that we got Marvin Bagley and Harrison Barnes out of the way, that kind of brings us to the others. These are guys not named De'Aaron Fox, not named Tyrese Halliburton, and not named Richaun Holmes. So we're going to break those down. First off, we're going to start with Nemanja Bjelica. I know Nemanja has been mentioned in tons of different trade rumors. He played earlier in the season. He decided he didn't want to play anymore. Now he wants to play again. He's back on the team. He's playing well. There's been some rumors going around that he might end up with the Lakers, with the Heat, with the Sixers. Calvin, where is the best landing spot for Nemanja Bjelica?
Where's the best landing spot for him? I would I'm not so sure. I'd probably say Miami or Philadelphia, just a team that needs a stretch shooter, which I guess there are a lot of those teams in general in the NBA, but out of the teams you listed, those two kind of make the most sense to me. This just goes to show, kids, if you can shoot, you're always going to be wanted out there. Remember that. He has garnered a lot of interest from a bunch of teams around the league for a guy that really hasn't played much at all this season and hasn't been one of the top performers really on his own team. So shooting is a dime a dozen out there for sure.
And he hasn't even really shot well either. But yeah. All right, moving on here. Hassan Whiteside has been rumored also with the Lakers as they're looking to upgrade at the center position. Leading the league last year in blocks and making over $20 million a year. What a year it's been for Hassan Whiteside. He seems to have fallen out of the rotation, has dealt with some minor injuries. He could potentially get bought out to join a contender. Calvin, what do you think is going to end up happening with Hassan?
I think he will end up on a contender somewhere. The Lakers seem to be the prominent team or the most likely landing spot for him. It's pretty clear that he's falling fast out of Sacramento, and it just makes me wonder, we've talked in the past on this show about, is there a disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff? Monty McNair was over the moon excited about signing Hassan in the offseason. He seemed to have big things planned for him, and for whatever reason, it may not be coaching staff related. It may just be that Hassan is not performing up to the expectations that were set for him this year, but there's definitely something wrong in the equation, and I'm not really sure where things went wrong, if it was more on Hassan's side or if it was more on the coaching staff side.
Yeah, really strange situation. It seemed like a match made in heaven at the start of the season. Hassan was back to be in Sacramento. He wanted to rewrite his story, and Monty was happy to have him, and here we are, back in Sacramento again, doing the same thing. All right, so let's move on to Corey Joseph. As I mentioned earlier, Corey Joseph has been getting starter minutes. We saw him start earlier this season. He's been there in crunch time. He's been there in the fourth quarter, part of the closing lineup. I know he has a cap hit, and the Kings are looking to create some more flexibility. Calvin, do you see Corey Joseph being moved before the deadline?
From the beginning of the season, felt like Corey Joseph was going to be moved. I thought there was no other way around it, especially when Tyrese Haliburton was drafted, and even more so after Tyrese Haliburton started playing so well right from the beginning. However, Corey Joseph has been in this mix, in this lineup consistently the entire year, and so I'm not so sure he's going to be moved at this point anymore. He certainly has got to bring some really good veteran leadership to this team, and if you're talking about moving a guy like Harrison Barnes, you don't have very many veterans for that leadership role left on the squad after that. So I'm starting to lean more to the fact that he won't be moved. I realize he's played a lot more recently because Tyrese has been out, and now that Tyrese is back, he's still on a minutes restriction, or at least he was last night. Not sure how long that'll continue for, but I think Corey Joseph is here to stay.
Okay. And our last one, I know it's a very strange year because we haven't heard any trade rumors surrounding him, but Buddy Hield. Is Buddy Hield happy? Is he finally in place here in Sacramento? And is he going to get moved before the deadline?
My gut says no, although I did read recently a pretty interesting proposal between the Kings and the Dallas Mavericks. This trade would send Buddy Hield to Dallas for Tim Hardaway Jr., an unprotected first-round pick in 2022, and 2 second-round picks. I think the Kings could actually make out pretty well in this deal. Dallas, they have been wanting to get more shooting around Luka for a while. Tim Hardaway Jr. is no slouch himself. He can score just as well as Buddy Hield can. And And the draft picks are the interesting part here. It's been rumored that Porzingis is being made available for Dallas. So, 2 years from now, if Porzingis is gone and they're still not playing that well, they've gotten off to a slow start this year, that unprotected first-round pick could end up being pretty valuable for Sacramento. So that's a deal that if it's an actual possibility, that's something I would pretty seriously entertain. Would you?
Yeah, I think Buddy Hield, it's strange that they haven't talked about him much, especially considering his position and Tyrese Halliburton and all that stuff. But I think that Buddy Hield might get moved this year. We will see. Grab your popcorn, folks. We'll be right back, and we're going over Blockbusters, not the defunct movie franchise. What's up, Kings fans? Welcome back. We are here. We are talking about blockbuster trades at the NBA deadline. The Kings, after losing 11 out of the last 14 games, have switched to sellers prior to this March 25th deadline. I know we talked about players that might be leaving the Sacramento Kings, but is it possible that Monte McNair could be working his magic, thinking of a blockbuster deal in the back to bring in a big name? It is possible. If you look at his history back with the Houston Rockets, that's exactly what they did in acquiring James Harden. There are a few big names available: Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, John Collins, LaMarcus Aldridge, DeMar DeRozan, and a few others that have been named across the league. Calvin, first, are any of these guys you like and somebody you would target? And two, do you think the Kings are interested in any of these guys?
Well, the short answer would be yes. I mean, look, we've said it multiple times. If Bradley Beal is available and you think that you can acquire Bradley Beal, you're obviously interested in trading for him. John Collins is another player who I would be very interested to get if I were any team, let alone Sacramento. Do I think that those are likely? No, I don't. I don't expect Bradley Beal to be traded, period. And I'm not really sure what the John Collins situation in Atlanta is either. Their whole franchise seems to be in a state of flux right now with an interim head coach and a lot of young players on that team. So it'll be very interesting to see. Do I think that Monte McNair can pull something off? Sure, I think he can. But when I really think about what a blockbuster trade is, it involves multiple all-stars or all-star caliber players being swapped on both sides. And that would mean to me that somebody like De'Aaron Fox is going to be traded from Sacramento, and I see that as being very unlikely. I'm not sure how you feel about it.
Yeah, I definitely don't think De'Aaron Fox is going anywhere. I really don't think Halliburton's going anywhere either. But I think that Monty's goal is to eventually make a blockbuster trade and bring in a second or third piece to pair with those two guys. I don't know if it's going to be this trade deadline or this offseason or next offseason. I think he's definitely working his magic, and he is going to be acquiring more assets to maybe potentially include in that blockbuster. But I have to think that he is working on a blockbuster deal. I don't know if it's going to be possible for him to do one, but I definitely think that that's on his mind.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess a blockbuster deal, if the Kings were to do a trade involving Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield, and Marvin Bagley, or multiple trades that involved all three of those players, I could potentially consider that a blockbuster move for Sacramento. They would certainly have to be receiving a pretty high price in return for it. But draft picks are another interesting part of the equation. We've seen what a few teams have the route that they've gone, like Houston and Oklahoma City and even Boston, a few years back, have stockpiled a ton of draft picks and used those in different ways to their advantage. So that's another potential route that the Sacramento Kings could take. And if they feel confident and keeping those picks and hitting on those picks, that would be I think the most ideal way for Sacramento to kind of build this team up, because we've mentioned it before that the ability to attract a big name free agent is not necessarily there yet. So that makes draft picks all the more important for Sacramento to have.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you look at his time in Houston, obviously Monty wasn't the man in charge. He was number 2. So it's hard to differentiate between whether that's Daryl Morey's style or his style or a combination or what is his own style. And that's what we're kind of figuring out at this point. But I can't really name many people they drafted in Houston during his time there. It was a lot of shipping guys out, wheeling, dealing, signing big name free agents. They didn't win a championship, but they were very successful. They were very competitive. And I hope, I can only hope for something similar to happen in Sacramento.
Yes, don't we all?
Yeah. We'll be right back, guys, with questions from you guys, the fans, Cowbell questions, right after this quick break.
Welcome back. It's time for the portion of the Royal Report where we turn the show over to you, the viewer, as we take questions from our faithful Royals out there in the kingdom. Today's first question comes to us from Bill Moulton. Bill, thank you very much for your submission. What do you got for us?
Is Monty McNair's team better than Vlade's?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm not sure if Bill is referring to the team, as in the players, or the staff around them. To be honest, if you were to look at the records, it looks like Vlade's player team was a better team. I think that this year's team, talent-wise, might be a little bit more talented, but they have underperformed. They have dealt with a lot of injuries. But if I'm looking at front office staff, I got to go with Monty's. I got to go with Monty's staff.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is kind of an unfinished product, so it's really hard for me to give an answer, sufficiently on this question. I think that I'm kind of viewing this the way you would if your college team gets a new head coach. They say, you give it 3 or 4 years until that team is built of purely that person's recruits, until you judge their building of the team. And I would kind of say the same thing for Monty McNair right now. Not only are there a lot of players on this current team that he either didn't draft or didn't assemble himself, but this team could look very, very different in a week or two than when it does currently. So there's still a lot of time left for me to put a final verdict and give an answer on whether Monty McNair's team is judged as a success, period, let alone whether it's better than the team that Vlade Divac put together. So to be continued, I would say.
Yep. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the support. Thanks for watching the show. Next question.
Which Kings player is most likely to be traded?
Most likely to get traded, I'm going to say Nemanja Bjelica. I think that not only are there a bunch of teams out there that have interest in acquiring him, out of everybody on this Kings roster, he's the guy that seems to fit into the future plans the least for Sacramento. At least that was definitely the case, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I expect out of all these guys, Bjelica will be moved above all the rest of them.
Wow, okay. I'm going to go with an unconventional pick here, and I'm going to go with Buddy Hield. I think that Buddy Hield needs to be moved. I think if you look at the outlook or future for this team, I think it's pretty obvious that Tyrese Halliburton is the shooting guard of the future. I think it's time to turn the keys over to him, and I think it's time for him to get those minutes for the rest of the season. I think that Monte's done a great job, and Luke and Buddy have all done a great job together in rebuilding some of Buddy Hield's trade value. I think it's time to move him. Next question.
Do you think Richaun Holmes will be the starting center next year?
I will say yes, Richaun will be the starting center for the Kings next year. I think that he has proven himself to be a player that Sacramento needs to focus on re-signing in the offseason. Of course, that's the key part of the equation. He's a free agent, so it's not guaranteed necessarily, but he's having a career year. 13 points a game, 8 rebounds, 1.5 blocks. He's shooting 65% from the field. That's, to me, enough for him to have earned a spot to be the starting center for this team next season.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on this one. It's a little weird, as you mentioned, saying somebody that's going to be a free agent will be the starting center next year, because there's so many different things that could happen. But I think Rashawn has shown that with his play that he is capable. I think he's shown with his words that he wants to be here in Sacramento. And I think that the team has shown that they're happy to have him. So those three things lead me to believe that Rashawn Holmes will be the starting center of the Sacramento Kings next year.
That's all the time we have for Cowbell questions. Thank you again for your submissions. If you have an idea for a question for next week's show, let us know by writing it down in the comments below this video. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Kings are hitting the road this week. They start off in Atlanta, taking on the Hawks. They'll also have games this week against the Hornets and the Washington Wizards. Atlanta, bit of an interesting team, very up and down season this year. They are a run and gun type team. They like to put up a lot of points. Of course, this would be the reunite game for Bogdanovic against the Sacramento Kings, but got to keep Trae Young down. De'Aaron Fox has got to win that matchup, and the Kings have to hold Atlanta under 120 points in order for them to win that game. Then they'll play the Hornets after that. Highly anticipated matchup between Rookie of the Year candidates that we didn't get to see just a week ago. Tyrese Haliburton versus LaMelo Ball. There aren't many of these marquee matchups left for the Kings on the back end of this schedule, so this game, not only should it be very entertaining to watch that matchup in particular, but the Kings have got to get some revenge against Charlotte for a terrible, terrible loss just a week ago. And then they'll end it up with a game against the Washington Wizards. #1 scoring player in the league, Bradley Beal. He's the guy you got to hold down. Westbrook is going to be another player to keep an eye on. I love the matchup of him and De'Aaron Fox. They're very similar players. Fast, like to get downhill, get to the free throw line. But to me, it's all about the backcourt. If Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox can find a way to outscore Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, that game should be easily in hand for Sacramento as well.
Yeah, 3 exciting games coming up. 3 very winnable games. 3 teams that are currently shuffling around and in a similar position as the Kings, trying to figure out what to do with their roster. We've seen Charlotte has been adding players. They signed Gordon Hayward to that big deal. They drafted LaMelo Ball. Are they going to be looking to add more pieces to that team? Will the Wizards be blowing it up by then? And will the Atlanta Hawks make any moves and bolster that roster or decide to move on? We've already seen them fire their head coach this season. So there is a fire lit in Atlanta. We will see what happens. I want to thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Royal Report. We love Sacramento Kings fans. We love the Sacramento Kings. We're happy to be here. New episode every Friday. Thank you all for watching, and go Kings.
Go Kings.
Thanks, guys.